Hello again. It's good to be with you. It's time to read another story from the Jesus Storybook Bible from my readings chair here in my house because these videos are being made in a time when we are not supposed to be leaving the house, and certainly we can't get together to have church. And I had been reading these stories to you, the children of Christ Community Church, before this came, and so I'm continuing that to give you at least one thing to do for a little while, maybe on Sunday or whatever day you choose to watch. I have to switch my glasses. I keep forgetting to do that. And this time I have a cup of tea ready because sometimes when I'm reading I get thirsty and I need a sip. And I have the book right here. And when I finished last time, I put the bookmark in. Do you remember what I read the last time I read? It was the story of the son of laughter and his dad. When his dad was asked to give the son back to God as a sacrifice, as a present. But instead of a terrible ending, the story had a happy ending because God said, no, you actually don't need to do that. And I'm grateful for how you trust me. And then God provided a ram stuck in the bushes that they could sacrifice instead. And that ram pointed to another beloved son, an only son, who was coming. The whole story does. So today, I'm going to read the story of the girl no one wanted. Do you know a girl like that? Are you a girl or a boy like that, where you sometimes get that feeling? This is the story of Jacob, Rachel, and Leah, and it's told originally in Genesis 20, chapter 29 to 30. There were once two sisters. The youngest sister was very beautiful, and her name was Rachel. But the oldest sister was not beautiful at all. Some thought her quite ugly, and her name was Leah. And I want to stop there and have you thinking about how many stories that you know start with that kind of a thought about two people or about sisters, and one seems to be loved and the other does not. I'm thinking of Cinderella, the story of Cinderella right now. And so it's interesting to think about how a story like Cinderella's was in the Bible way before the story of Cinderella was written. Now, Rachel was the kind of girl who always gets invited to parties and chosen for the team. Everyone loved her. And poor Leah, no one hardly even noticed her. One day, their cousin Jacob came to stay. He was one of Isaac's sons, and he was running away from something. He was on the run. You see, Jacob had stolen and cheated and made some enemies, including his own brother. And now he was hiding. The funny thing is, Jacob, of all people, was the one God gave the special promise to, the same promise he had given Jacob's grandfather, Abraham. I will rescue the world through your family. But then, maybe we've learned in life, or we are learning, that God chooses sometimes people we least expect to do his great things, as we'll see. Jacob stayed a long time working for his uncle Laban. Laban was then Rachel and Leah's dad. One day Laban said, Jacob, I've decided to pay you for your work. What do you want? A sudden thought struck Laban. How about one of my daughters as a wife? Jacob looked at Rachel and he looked at Leah. Who would he choose? And of course, naturally, the way things usually go, he chose Rachel. I'll work 7 years for free, Jacob said, if I can marry Rachel. So Jacob worked 7 years, and at last his wedding day arrived. But before that, I'll go back to this picture, and there you can see a picture. I assume that's Jacob in the back, chasing sheep, raising sheep, and it's Laban standing there with probably Rachel. Maybe it's Leah. I can't tell. When you look at this picture, they both look pretty much the same to me, so I don't know what's going on. The two girls. So the wedding day came 7 years later. But that night, Laban played a nasty trick on Jacob. Instead of sending Rachel to marry Jacob, and they would wear veils, the women would wear veils when they were married in that day, he sent Leah. Like I mentioned, in those days they didn't have electricity, so it was dark in their tent and the women wore veils and you couldn't see faces properly. So Jacob suspected nothing until the next morning. Then Jacob woke up and he screamed. His new wife was laying beside him, but it wasn't Rachel. It was Leah. Jacob jumped out of bed. "Laban," he cried, "you scoundrel." But Laban said, "Don't worry about it. Work for me another 7 years and then you can marry Rachel." Because in those days it wasn't unusual for people to have for several marriages. So Jacob worked for Laban another 7 years, and at last Rachel became his wife. Now Jacob had 2 wives, but of his 2 wives, Jacob loved Rachel the best. "No one loves me," Leah said. "I'm too ugly." But God did not think she was ugly. And when he saw that Leah was not loved and that no one wanted her, God chose her, to love her specially, to give her a very important job. One day, God was going to rescue the whole world through Leah's family. Now, when Leah knew that God loved her in her heart, suddenly it didn't matter anymore whether her husband loved her best or if she was prettiest. Someone had chosen her. Someone did love her with a never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. So when Leah had a baby boy, she called him Judah, which means, "This time I will praise the Lord." And that is just what she did. And you'll never guess what job God gave Leah. Yeah. You see, when God looked at Leah, he saw a princess. And sure enough, that's exactly what she became. One of Leah's children's children would be a prince. The Prince of Heaven. God's son. This prince would love God's people. They wouldn't need to be beautiful for him to love them. He would love them with all of his heart, and they would be beautiful because he loved them, like Leah. And so here's a picture of Leah walking with a couple of the kids, and one of them must be Judah, who eventually becomes an ancestor to this other child that was coming. Again, here we have a story that points to a child that is coming. And that's the end of that particular story. Shalom and serenity until we meet again.